story of the day today had been the hostage deal in the Middle East, with the agreement to release 50 hostages, women and children, in exchange for a 4-day pause in the fighting. Israel agreeing to pause its military operations in Gaza. Now, I want to bring in Moshe Lavi on all of this in New York. He's been on the program before, believing that his brother-in-law is one of the hostages. We talked when you were here in our New York studio about your brother-in-law, and then we had your sister-in-law on there last week. I know it must be something to hear this news. I know your brother-in-law is not one of them, one of the people that was released, but how do you feel hearing the news that others are going to be free? All right, so it looked like Moshe's shot. I thought maybe his audio would be working, but his shot was frozen there. But I thought maybe sometimes the way that works, his audio would be working, but it obviously was not. So we'll try to get him back on. He sat here with me in the studio in New York, and he talked about his brother-in-law in excruciating detail, just so much emotion at that time. It was shortly after October 7th, and he had just learned, his sister-in-law was on the show last week. She and her young children had escaped from the Hamas terrorists, and now Moshe's back with us. Your shot, there you are. Your shot, I apologize for that. It just froze up the way the internet works sometimes as you were about to start speaking. But I was saying, how do you feel hearing about this deal? I know your brother-in-law is not among those who will be set free.
Yes, thank you for having me again, Connor. It's a very relieving and happy day for us to learn that hopefully 50 Israeli captives will be released, the most vulnerable hostages, really, children and women. But of course, we're also still living in our own angst and despair, because Omri will not be released. Many of the hostages will remain behind. And we just hope that this will be a first step for many more agreements or many more steps taken to ensure all hostages return to their home. So
you think that, you talk about the relief that you feel. It's interesting to hear you put it that way, that it makes it more likely that your brother-in-law will be maybe in the next round?
I don't know if it's more likely, but I'm just happy to know that children will return to their families. And mothers will return to their families. I'm trying to be optimistic, but we also know the conditions on the ground are very difficult. And so it's imperative that any more developments will take place immediately, as soon as possible, because time is of the essence. And without taking those steps immediately, the lives of those hostages will remain at stake.
Of course, the way they've structured this, as I'm sure you've heard, is that, the 4-day pause in the fighting will coincide with the release, to your point, of 50 women and children that are being held hostage. But from what I understand, there is the opportunity for more hostages to be released and further pauses to be implemented, depending on how many hostages. So what would you like to see the Israeli government do? Some are calling, I know some hostage families, even for a longer or even a permanent ceasefire. What's your point of view on all of this?
I'm not a policymaker or a military strategist. My point of view is that the hostages need to be returned, and I want to believe, and I truly believe, that the Israeli government will continue doing its utmost to ensure their release. The authorities there have been communicating with us, saying that this is one of the primary objectives of the war, of the operation, the counter-operation. I believe it should be the primary objective, and I hope that this will continue. I don't know what's the right approach to do it. I'm not an elected official. I know my role here is to make sure this stays on top of the agenda, and then the elected officials in a democratic country like Israel will be able to implement the policy.
I mentioned we had your sister-in-law on as well. I don't know, with everything going on, you've had a chance to speak to her. Is her thoughts similar to yours? How's she doing?
Yeah, I speak with my family and, of course, my sister on a daily basis. Today, they received gifts I sent to my nieces and to her, and was really happy to have that call and for them to receive those gifts. Hopefully, I'll be with them in December in Israel. She's having a difficult they having difficult. It's been difficult almost 2 months now, which is terrible to say. But she's staying strong. She's going to keep advocating for Omri, keep advocating for all the hostages who are left behind, and we're here to make sure that she remains strong and feeling supported.
Yeah.
That's my role and the role of our family.
Of course. Your sister, I should say, as you rightly said, not your brother-in-law is who's being held hostage. But that day, just one more before we go, just to remind people, and I think a lot of people probably saw your previous interview, but they escaped, right? Wasn't that the way it all played out? And then your brother-in-law was taken.
Yeah, they luckily they were not taken by Hamas terrorists. What eventually happened, we learned the testimony, I believe after I was on air, is that they were instructed to stay in the house. They were told that the Hamas guard will keep the house guarded, and if they leave, they'll be shot on the spot. They witnessed through the window the horror that took place in Nichole. They didn't leave the house, and luckily before Hamas terrorists came back to retrieve them and decide whether to execute them or take them hostage as well, IDF soldiers came and rescued them.
Well, all the best to your sister and her beautiful family, and we hope for the best for your brother-in-law, that maybe next time we hear about hostages coming out, he'll be among those names. Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider, and don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.